Hey, what's happening, guys? Today I'm going to talk about some wheel basics. Now, chances are this is going to be a refresher course for some of you, but for those of you that it isn't, stick around and I'll show you some things that you may not already know. Okay, first thing, on wheels. When you measure a wheel, what you're always going to want to pay attention to is where the tire sits. A wheel like this is a wheel similar to what I have on my Impala. When you look at this and we measure it, overall diameter from the very outside to the very outside, that measurement doesn't mean anything. That measurement is irrelevant. To see the diameter of this wheel, you actually want to measure from the tire mounting surface. That's going to be this inside lip here. So it's not the very outside edge, it's this inside lip. So I run my tape measure right up against that inside lip, and you go to the other inside lip, and you see that's 8.5. So this is actually a 20 by 8.5 wheel. If you were measuring out here, you would say it was a 20 by 9.5, but that's absolutely not what it is. It's an 8.5 wheel. So you're going to want to pay attention to that when you get ready to order your tires and match your tires to your wheels. And again, there's a lot of variances with when you're ordering tires and trying to figure out your rim diameter and what tire size and tire width you can get away with. But again, you're going to want to measure from the inside to the inside, not the very outside to the outside. The second big thing when it comes to wheel fitment is going to be backspacing. And now you hear everybody talk about backspacing and offset, and it's like, okay, which one should I be talking about? Some people are like, oh, it's got a 20 millimeter offset, negative offset. That's a positive offset here, 10 millimeter. Some people are like, I need 4-inch backspacing, 5-inch backspacing. It can get pretty confusing. So here's what that all means. Basically, offset is just one mechanism to talk about where the center position is relative to the actual hoop of the wheel. And again, when I say center position, let's talk about the wheel mounting surface. So I'm talking about this right here. So if you think about this in if you think about a wheel as a construction of a hoop and then the center section, what we're talking about really is where the center section mounts into the hoop. Now, if you have for instance, let's say we have an 8-inch diameter wheel. And let's first talk about backspacing, because backspacing and offset can sometimes talk about the same thing. And in fact, they do if it's a negative offset. But from a backspacing standpoint, if you've got a wheel that's 20 by 8, for instance, and you've got 4 inches of backspacing, that means that the wheel mounting position, this pad here, this wheel mounting surface, is exactly between the rim. It's exactly between. It's halfway between this and this. 4 inches is exactly half of 8 inches. So when you measure from here, the way to do that is you get a straight edge, and again, this isn't going to be exactly 4 inches because it's 8.5, but you get a straight edge and you measure from the straight edge, and in this case, this wheel has 5.25 inch of backspacing. Now, it's a 20 by 8 wheel, but it's got 5.25 inches of backspacing. That's important because when you go to fit the wheel on the car, you're going to want to know how much space you have from that wheel mounting surface, and in this case, either the back or the front wheel, up against where the frame is going to be. So that's an important measurement to take consideration of. So backspacing is the amount of space from this wheel mounting surface to the back lip. That's what it is. Offset can be the same thing. Offset just is a matter of saying from the center point, if you're exactly in the center of the wheel, offset is the amount of degrees forward, which would be positive offset, or backward, which would be negative offset. So if a wheel has, say, 20 degrees of negative offset, that wheel has backspacing. That's to say that the position of this is back from center. Now, you see on a lot of modern cars, the wheel mounting surface is way close to the front. There's not a deep dish. You know what I mean when I say dish is the amount of space that's in the front here. This mounting position of the center section is way towards the front. You see that on a ton of modern cars. Those don't have backspacing. Those all have positive offset wheels. That's because the center position is pulled way to the front. It's sucked way to the front of the wheel. Now, on old school cars and hot rods, it's cool to have deep dish. So you see the backspacing gets shrunk down to a minimum. There's almost no backspacing. Modern wheels have a ton of back spacing because it's almost all in the back. So it all depends on where it goes. But offset and back spacing talk about the same thing. Offset just gives you the ability to talk about positive or negative, and back spacing just says how much space there is behind. So it's kind of singular there. So that's what we're talking about. Let's go over to the car really quick, and I'll show you why that's important. So on a muscle car like we've got here, the 66 Chevy Impala Super Sport, it's important when you're ordering wheels, especially custom wheels. For stock wheels, they are what they are, but for custom wheels, you're going to want to get the right fit. And what people typically try to find is a wheel that pushes, that sits out far enough that it makes sense and the proportion is good with the body line. So if the wheel was sucked in too far, it would look awkward because there would be a giant gap from the body line to the actual wheel and tire. So fitment is one thing. The second thing is if you ordered the wrong wheels and you bolted them up, you could have clearance issues with your brakes and your brake drums. So it's important to know what wheel size you're looking at. Let's go to the front wheel here just because it's a little bit cleaner, easier to show. On a wheel like this, it's important, a front wheel especially when you're talking about turning radius, that you have the right back spacing or the right offset, because too much or too little and you're going to run into your tie rods, you're going to run into your steering, or even worse, when you turn, you're going to run into fenders, you're going to run into all kinds of things. The frame even, you're going to get some rubbing. There's nothing more annoying than getting rubbing when you're turning your tires. So dialing in your tires and wheels is really, really important. Now, one of the best ways to figure out what wheels are going to fit on your car are ask somebody who has that car. I get asked all the time on my Impalas, hey, what wheels do you have? What back spacing? What's the offset? What size of wheels and tires are you running? And that's a great way to do it. You ask what works. I mean, for me, it was important that I don't have a ton of rubbing. So I would always figure out, okay, what's the widest wheel or tire that I could get away with? And you can kind of figure that out. But by doing your math and doing your measurements, you'll be sure not to waste a ton of money buying wheels that aren't going to work for your car. Now, you can push the limits. You see people with huge wheels on their cars all the time, huge tires, low profile, but giant wheels, pushing the limits and getting away with stuff. It's all what you're willing to deal with. I'm not really willing to deal with rubbing and grinding and bashing into stuff when I'm going over corners, and so there's a threshold that I stick within. But basically, if you're concerned about it, ask somebody who's got a car similar to yours. We've got an active group on Classic Nation Facebook page, so guarantee if you ask a question about wheels and tires on your specific muscle car, somebody in that group will be able to point you in the right direction. If you've got an Impala, I'd certainly be happy to help, and if you know anything about Mustangs, Evan's probably your guy to ask. But wheels and tires, super important. Don't waste money on wheels that aren't going to work for you or tires that aren't going to fit the wheels. Do it right the first time. Make your measurements. Chart it out. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Guys, thanks so much. We appreciate it. You know, we've got a ton of projects at the shop going here. We've got the Fleet lines. We've got the Impalas. Over at Evan's shop, he's got his Mustangs happening. So if you're into muscle cars and you're into classic cars, we'd love you to be a subscriber to the channel. Otherwise, stay tuned. We'll see you in the next video. Thanks.